I built this house with my own hands. Not literally. I never held a hammer or laid a single brick. But every corner of it carries something of me. The way the curtains catch the morning light. Because I spent 3 weekends searching for exactly the right fabric. The smell of the kitchen in the afternoon, warm and full. Because I cooked there every single day with the kind of intention that most people save for special occasions. The garden out back, where I planted things that take years to grow. Because I always believed we were going to be here for years. I built this house with love, with patience, with every quiet sacrifice I made without ever asking for anything in return. And he destroyed it without even having the decency to leave. First stop, my name doesn't matter. What matters is that I am a Cancer woman, and if you know anything about us, you already understand that home is not just a place we live. Home is the place we pour ourselves into. Home is the thing we protect above everything else. It is not walls and a roof. It is the accumulation of every morning we woke up early to make sure the people we love had something warm to eat. It is the energy we put into creating a space where our children feel completely safe. It is the emotional architecture that holds a family together, even when everything outside those walls is falling apart. When someone violates that space, they are not just cheating on a partner. They are destroying something that took years to build and cannot simply be rebuilt by walking away and starting over. I want you to understand what I am going to tell you, because it is not just a story about betrayal. It is a story about a woman who gave everything and discovered that everything was never enough for someone who had already decided to take more than he deserved. We met when I was 26. I was working in administration for a small company, nothing glamorous. But I was good at it, and I was proud of how I did things. I was the kind of person who made sure everything was in order. The kind of person who remembered the small details that other people forgot. That is how I have always been. I notice things. I pay attention. I care. Those qualities made me good at my job. And later they made me a good mother. And for a long time I believed they made me a good partner. What I did not understand yet was that those same qualities, my attentiveness, my dedication, my deep investment in the people around me, would eventually become the things that blinded me to what was happening right in front of me. His name was Daniel. He was warm and funny, and he had a way of making you feel like you were the most important person in any room. I fell for that quickly, maybe too quickly, because I was at an age where I was starting to think seriously about what kind of life I wanted. And he seemed like the answer to a question I had been carrying for a long time. He was affectionate in the beginning, attentive. He called when he said he would call. He remembered the things I told him. He showed up. And when someone shows up consistently for long enough, you start to believe that they will always show up. That is a trap, I think. Consistency is not the same as loyalty. Showing up early does not mean someone will not leave late. We married when I was 29. I remember thinking on our wedding day that I was beginning the real part of my life, the part that mattered. I had always been a person who took relationships seriously, who understood that love was not just a feeling, but a choice you made every single day, a set of actions that accumulated over time into something lasting. I was ready to make that choice. I made it every morning when I woke up beside him. I made it every evening when I made sure our home was a place worth coming back to. Our daughter was born 2 years after we married. If you are a Cancer woman and you have children, you already know what I am about to say. Something shifts when you become a mother that cannot be undone. It is not just love. It is a ferocity that lives in your chest and does not sleep. You would do absolutely anything. You would burn the world down. You would also quietly rebuild it, brick by brick, with your bare hands. Because that is what your child needs. From the moment I held her, Everything I did was filtered through the question of what kind of home I was creating for her, what kind of environment she was going to grow up in, what she was going to understand about love and safety, and what it meant to belong somewhere. I became the center of gravity in our household. That is the only way I know how to describe it. Daniel worked long hours and I managed everything else. The schedules, the appointments, the meals, the school preparations, the friendships, the emotional temperature of the house. I did not resent it, at least not at first. I genuinely believed that this was how love worked. That you invested and invested and invested and the returns were not financial but emotional. A family that was close. A home that was full. A marriage that was real. I believed that Daniel saw what I was doing and that he appreciated it even when he did not say so. I believed that the life we were building together meant the same thing to him that it meant to me. The signs were there before I let myself see them. I need to be honest about that because a Cancer woman is not naive. We are intuitive, deeply so. And I felt the shift before I could name it. There was a change in the quality of his attention somewhere around the 3rd year. After our daughter was born, small things. He would be on his phone more than usual and go quiet when I walked into the room. He started going to the gym at hours that did not quite make sense given his work schedule. He was less present even when he was physically there, sitting at the dinner table, but somewhere else entirely in his mind. I noticed all of it. I filed all of it away in the part of my mind that I was not ready to examine yet. Because when you have built your entire life around a home and the people in it, you do not reach for the worst explanation first. You explain it away. You tell yourself he is tired, he is stressed. This is a phase. All relationships go through periods of distance, and what you need to do is hold on and bring him back. So I held on. I tried harder. I made his favorite meals more often. I suggested weekend trips. I asked him about his work, his thoughts, his feelings, with the focused attention of someone who genuinely wanted to understand. I told myself that I was being a good partner by staying engaged, by not pulling away just because he was. What I was actually doing, though I could not see it clearly then, was pouring more of myself into a space that had already been quietly vacated. I was filling a container that had a hole in the bottom, and the whole time, I was also protecting the atmosphere of our home for our daughter, keeping the surface of our family life smooth and warm and normal, because she did not deserve to feel whatever cold air was beginning to move through the rooms at night. The moment I found out was not dramatic in the way people sometimes imagine these things are. There was no single confrontation, no explosive discovery. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November. Our daughter was at school. I was looking for a charger in the drawer of the bedside table on his side of the bed, and I found his phone there, unlocked, because he had been in a hurry that morning. I did not go looking. I want to be clear about that. I was not searching for evidence because I had already made up my mind. I found the phone. The screen was lit. And what was on that screen answered every question I had been too afraid to ask for the past year and a half. Her name was Camila. She worked with him. They had been seeing each other for 14 months. I know the exact number because I sat there on the edge of that bed, our bed, in our room, in the house I had poured everything into, and I read through those messages with the kind of thorough, methodical attention that Cancer women bring to everything, even to the things that are destroying them. I did not cry immediately. That surprised me about myself. I felt something very cold and very still move through me, like the temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. I kept reading until there was nothing left to read, and then I put the phone back exactly where I had found it, went downstairs, and sat in the kitchen. Our kitchen. The room where I had made thousands of meals. The room where my daughter sat every morning eating breakfast before school. The room that smelled like rosemary and lemon. because I had always kept fresh herbs on the windowsill. I sat at that table and I looked at the window and I thought, with a clarity that I had not expected, that I could not allow this to unravel what I had built for my daughter. Whatever was going to happen next, whatever I was going to feel when the cold stillness eventually broke open into something warmer and more painful, I could not let it pour through the walls of that house and reach her. That is the thing about Cancer women that people do not fully understand. We do not fall apart in the ways that make other people feel better about themselves. We do not perform our grief for an audience. We go inward and we assess and we protect and we plan. The pain was there. I want you to understand that the pain was absolutely there. Enormous and immediate and real. But it did not come out of me as screaming or weeping or throwing things. It came out of me slowly, over weeks and months, in quiet moments when my daughter was asleep and I was standing in the garden in the dark, or in the shower where I could let the sound of the water cover whatever sounds I needed to make. The outside of our home stayed calm because she needed it to be calm. The inside of me was another story entirely. I made my decision before he came home that evening. By the time I heard his car in the driveway, I had already moved through several stages of something that other people might take months to process. That is not because I am cold or because I did not love him. I loved him deeply. I had built a life around that love with the kind of intention and care that does not just evaporate because someone betrays you. But I am a Cancer woman, and I have a particular relationship with the concept of home that goes beyond sentiment. I understood in that kitchen that he had made a choice that could not be unmade, and that whatever happened next, I was not going to be the one who dismantled what I had spent years creating. If anything was going to be dismantled, it was going to be his place in it. When he walked through the door that evening, he could tell immediately that something had changed. He looked at me in a way that told me he had been waiting for this, that some part of him had been carrying the anticipation of this moment for a long time. He tried to speak first, perhaps hoping to control the shape of the conversation, but I was already ahead of him. I told him I knew. I told him exactly what I knew and exactly how I had found out and exactly how long I understood. It had been happening. I watched the expression on his face cycle through several things in rapid succession. Surprise. Then a kind of deflation. Then something that looked almost like relief, which told me more than any of the messages I had read that afternoon. He apologized. Of course he apologized. He said things that people say in these moments, that it had meant nothing, that he did not know why it had happened, that he had been going through something that he could not explain. I listened to all of it with the same stillness that had been with me since the afternoon. And when he was finished, I told him that the apology was not the issue. The issue was that he had brought something into our home. He had allowed something corrupt and dishonest to exist within the same walls, where our daughter lived, where she learned what love was supposed to look like, where she was building her understanding of what it meant to be safe with someone. He had not just betrayed me. He had contaminated the most important thing I had ever made. He slept in the spare room that night. I lay in our bed and stared at the ceiling and felt the full weight of what the next months were going to require of me. I thought about my daughter asleep down the hall. I thought about the school run in the morning, the breakfast I would make, the way her face looked when she was eating, and everything was ordinary and fine. I thought about how important it was that her world not crack open just because mine had. And then I thought about myself, about the woman who had planted the herbs on the windowsill and chosen the curtain fabric and cooked every meal with intention. And I made a promise to her, to that woman, that she was not going to disappear into this. She was not going to be defined by what someone else had done to her. She was going to come through this, and the home she came through it in was going to belong to her. The weeks that followed were the hardest and also, in a strange way, the most clarifying of my life. There is something that happens to a Cancer woman when she has been pushed beyond a certain point. The softness that people sometimes mistake for weakness becomes something else entirely. I began to see this situation with a precision I had not had before. Not because I was angry, though I was angry deeply and continuously, in the way that a fire burns when it has enough fuel to sustain itself, but because the fog of hoping and explaining and trying had been completely cleared away. I could see everything now. I could see what the relationship had actually been for the last several years, which was not the partnership I had believed in, but a performance of one, maintained on my side with genuine investment and on his side with diminishing returns. I could see the places where I had made myself smaller to accommodate his comfort, the ways I had interpreted his absences as temporary rather than symptomatic. I could see all of it, and while it was painful to see, it was also in some essential way a relief. You cannot fix something you cannot see clearly, and I was done trying to fix something that had not been broken by accident. We spent 3 weeks in a kind of suspended state that I would not wish on anyone. He was still in the house because leaving had not yet been formally decided, and there were logistics to work through. There were conversations that needed to happen away from our daughter. There were mornings where the three of us sat at the breakfast table, and I watched him try to be present and normal, and I watched her be exactly who she always was, open and trusting and full of the easy happiness of a child who does not yet know that the ground can shift, and I understood with absolute certainty that she was the reason I was holding everything together so carefully, and also that I could not keep holding it together in the current form indefinitely. Something had to change, not just for me, for her, because children feel things that adults think they are successfully hiding. They absorb the emotional weather of a household through their skin. She deserved to grow up in a home that was honest, even if honesty meant that the home was going to look different than it did now. I told him he needed to leave at the end of the 3rd week. I did not say it in anger. I said it with the same quiet certainty that I brought to every decision I had ever made about that house, about what belonged in it and what did not. I had spent those 3 weeks not just grieving, but preparing practically, getting clear on what I needed, what our daughter needed, what the path forward looked like. That is also a Cancer thing. We grieve and we prepare simultaneously. We are capable of enormous feeling and enormous organization at the same time, because we understand that the people who depend on us do not stop depending on us just because our hearts are broken. He left on a Saturday morning in December. I watched him carry his things out to his car, and I did not feel what I expected to feel. I had expected something final and terrible, some great emotional rupture that would signal the end of this chapter of my life. What I felt instead was something quieter and more complex. There was grief in it, genuine grief for the years and the love and the version of the future I had believed in. But underneath the grief, there was something else. Something that felt, unexpectedly, like the particular stillness of a house after a storm has passed. Everything had been disrupted and rearranged, and some things had been damaged. And it was going to take time to assess the damage and longer still to repair it. But the storm was over, and the house was still standing. My house. The house I had built. My daughter asked me that evening where her father was. I had prepared for this question. I told her, in the simple and honest language that children deserve, that her father and I were not going to live together anymore, but that we both loved her completely, and that was never going to change. She was quiet for a moment, the way children are when they are processing something large and new. And then she asked if she could still sleep in her own bed. I told her yes. Always. Her room was hers. This house was hers. Nothing that was happening was going to change that. She seemed to accept this, and we ate dinner together. And I read to her before bed. And when she was asleep, I sat in the kitchen again. The same kitchen where I had sat on that November afternoon. And this time I let myself feel all of it. The months after he left were not easy. I want to say that clearly because I think there's a version of this story that goes too quickly to resilience, that rushes past the difficulty to get to the part where everything is fine. And that kind of rushing is its own dishonesty. There were mornings where getting out of bed required more effort than it should have. There were evenings after my daughter was asleep where the silence in the house felt enormous, and I was not sure what to do with myself inside it. There were moments when I missed him, not the him I had discovered him to be, but the him I had believed in, the person I had loved and built toward. And missing that version of someone who never fully existed is one of the stranger kinds of grief, because you are mourning something that was partly an illusion. And that makes the mourning feel illegitimate, which adds an extra layer of difficulty to the whole process. But there were also other things in those months. There were mornings where I woke up and the house was quiet in a way that felt like my own silence, rather than the silence of waiting for someone else to fill the space. There were evenings where I cooked dinner for just me and my daughter, and the meal was exactly what I wanted it to be. Seasoned the way I liked it, eaten at the pace I preferred, with the conversation that mattered to me. There was a Saturday in March when I spent the entire afternoon in the garden, planting things, repotting things, trimming back what had overgrown. And I realized at some point in the late afternoon that I had not thought about him at all for several hours. Not because I was suppressing anything, but because I had been genuinely absorbed in the thing in front of me, in the soil and the light and the growing things, and I had been enough for myself in that moment. The garden was important to me during that time in a way I struggled to articulate. I had planted it years ago with the idea that it was a place for our family, a space that would grow alongside us. Now I was tending it alone, and something about the process of tending, of showing up every week and giving the plants what they needed and watching them respond felt like a practice in the exact things I was trying to rebuild in myself: patience, consistency, the belief that the things you invest in will eventually show you something beautiful. The garden did not care that my marriage had failed. The herbs on the windowsill did not require me to be okay. They required me to water them, and in doing something that small and that ordinary, I sometimes found my way back to a version of myself that felt more like who I actually was. My daughter thrived. That is the part of the story that kept me going on the hardest days. She thrived in a way that told me I had made the right decision about protecting the quality of her environment, about not allowing the difficulty of what I was going through to leak into the corners of her daily life. She is a curious, warm, confident child who loves her room and her garden and the kitchen and all the small rituals of the home I had built for her. And watching her move through those spaces with ease and joy was both a comfort and a reminder of what it had all been for. The home I had built was still doing what I had built it to do. That had not changed. The only thing that had changed was who was in it, and increasingly, that felt like a change I could not just survive, but genuinely inhabit. I want to say something to you, to any woman reading or listening to this who is in the middle of something similar, who is in the part of the story that I was in that November afternoon in the kitchen, sitting with the knowledge that the thing you built has been violated and not yet knowing what comes next. I want you to know that the most cancer thing you can do is not to hold on at any cost. The most cancer thing you can do is to know the difference between what is worth protecting and what you have been protecting past its time. I held on to my marriage longer than I should have because I love deeply, and I do not give up on things easily. And I confused those qualities for wisdom when they were actually, in this case, obstacles. What I eventually understood is that the home, the real home, the emotional home, the space of safety and warmth and love, was not the marriage. It was the life I had built inside of it. And that life was mine. It had always been mine. He had not taken it with him when he left because he had never really been the one creating it. The curtains are still the ones I spent 3 weekends choosing. The herbs are still on the windowsill. The garden is full of things that are still growing. My daughter still sleeps in her room and wakes up every morning and comes downstairs. And the house is exactly what I built it to be. Warm and full and safe. A place where the people in it know they belong. I did not save my marriage, but I saved everything that ever actually mattered. And I am still here inside it. And the home is still mine. And some mornings I stand in the kitchen before my daughter wakes up. And I look at the light coming through the window. And I think about all the things that survived. What should have broken them? And I think about myself among those things. And I feel something that I am not quite ready to call happiness yet, but that I recognize. Slowly and with some surprise, as peace. The betrayal happened inside these walls. But so did everything that came after. And what came after was mine.